Good evening. The League of Women Voters of Oxford, North Mississippi welcomes you to the first of 4 forums introducing the 8 candidates for the new position of County Judge in Lafayette County. I am Ruth Odell, the co-president, and along with Ruby Kelly. The League has conducted many forums over Zoom in the last 2 years, and we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't. So here are the procedures for the evening. Please remain on mute throughout the forum. Put your questions in the chat, and the moderators will ask them to the candidates. Ms. Amy Reeder is our timekeeper. She will be using colored cards to time all the speakers, even the moderators. Now she's just going to hold up a few of those and show you where she is and when they come up. You move over a little bit there. Yeah, stop. Yeah, there you go. Good. All right. Each candidate has 10 minutes for an opening statement and 5 minutes for a closing statement. And there are 25 minutes allotted for Q&A. Also, this is not a debate. Let's all remember that. This is a forum, so it's not going to be any back and forth. Just a reminder to everyone, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support specific candidates. We are issue-oriented, and you will see that in the questions we will pose to the candidates. Both candidates have completed a bio and a questionnaire on the League's Vote 411 website. I put 3 links in the chat. You can look there. 2 of them will take you to the candidates' responses to the questionnaire. Ms. Fondren is there first, and then Mr. Garrett's. And then you'll also see a link to our website, which that way you could go to Vote 411 yourself, put in your address, and see what's going to be on your ballot, what candidates, and what they have filled out on themselves. Now I will turn it over to our moderators. Don Mason and Joanne Gabrinowitz are both retired law professors from the University of Mississippi.
Thank you, Ruth. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to welcome you all and say this is a terrific opportunity to learn about a historic event in the county of Lafayette. We are having our first county court that is required by law based on growth and population. As a result, we have 8 candidates, and we will bring them all to you during the course of the next 2 weeks. And they do have very impressive bios. I'm not going to go into them here, just see them online. And with that, I think we will proceed. And I will just introduce my co-moderator, Don Mason, who will talk to you a little bit later. But for right now, we have 10 minutes for Ms. Carnelia Fondren. She will share her opening statement with us. Ms. Fondren. You're on mute, Carnelia. Unmute yourself. You're still muted. Look in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. There should be an icon of a microphone.
Right,
That's
There you go.
Okay, you've just muted yourself again.
okay. It's just the opposite. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can now.
I apologize for that. Good afternoon. I'm Carnelia Fondren, candidate for Lafayette County Court Judge. And of course, we all here, a lot of us here know that this is a new position and it will become effective January 2023. This position, of course, will be assisting or will have what we call exclusive jurisdiction of youth court matters. And this is very important because how we handle our youth in this county can maybe have an impact on what happened to them later on in life and what happens later in circuit court. So at the research that they do on a yearly basis on what we now call CPS, formerly DPS, it shows about 300 cases of neglect and reports of abuse in the county. Many times that's on the delinquency side, where we have our young folks who make bad choices, and part of the responsibility of this youth court will be to intervene and try to get them back on the right path. Also, on the other neglect side, we have parents who, for whatever reason, many times parents are on drugs or have problems, lack of income, or whatever the reason may be, end up in youth court. And so the job of this court is to monitor those folks and get them back on the right track. Now, my vision in this area is to work with all the parties involved. I want to work with community care. We currently have a part-time prosecutor, Prosecutor Jay Chain, and of course CPS working. And then there's what we call a guardian ad litem, which is attorneys for the children who's in the courtroom the majority of the time. So this is not something that I anticipate that we will be able to make a full-time part of the court, but I think we can beef it up and get more community agency coming together in a collaborative effort to bring forth some better outcome for our youth. And so I look forward to working with all those entities and bringing a new vision to the youth court. I'm not making any promises because my first plan is to go in, if elected, if you give me that honor on January 1, and to evaluate the system, or really start after that, but to evaluate the system, find out what's working and what's not working, then come back with some recommendation that's realistic. Because I know the county will have some control over when we can and cannot go to court and bring other folks in with us, such as the prosecutor and CPS and all those folks. And the other thing that's slated to the youth court will be any civil action under 200,000. Today I was in circuit today. They were doing a civil court case over there in circuit, which I'm sure will take up a minimum of 2 days. So this will be assist circuit court and getting some of those cases through the system, particularly criminal cases. They've been in term over there since October, 1st of October, and no criminal cases have been tried. So this court is very needed on the circuit side. As far as eminent domain, I think that the statute is pretty clear on how that's to be handled. But I think we need to understand that when the community is in need of an improvement for whatever reason, that people are a human being and they are involved in this case too. So I would certainly keep that in mind in any eminent domain cases that I was honored to preside over. I'm now the only candidate who has municipal court experience. And this is important because I've made the tough decision about sometime our youth, I have to decide where we're going to house them. They've made bad choices. And normally that would be a felony charge. But do we want them in the jail with hardened criminals? And so I've made decision on bonds on where our young folks involved, and made the decision on whether we leave our young folks who really, like I said, committed felony crimes down at youth court. So it's very important that we bring with this the position a passion about the position. I also have prosecuted for a number of years, which brings to this position. I bring from the prosecution standpoint and from the defense standpoint, and I think that's important as a judge, that you need to know both sides of the bench, and I bring those to you. I've worked with a number of community service agencies here in the county. I was born and raised here in Lafayette County. I've worked with Family Crisis just about since its inception. I was a member of Red Cross. I now do volunteer work with the Volunteer Lawyer Project in Jackson. I do a number of cases in for legal services. When someone else won't go, I think their motto is that if nobody else will go, call Carnelia, maybe she'll go. So I do live with the passion that I talk about, that I believe everyone is entitled to representation, guilty or innocent, they're entitled to representation, because that's what our system offers. And those values, my experience as a municipal court judge at Holly Springs has taught me to be open with everyone. My court there is totally open. There are no backroom deals. Whatever is offered by the prosecution is said out in public. Everyone in courtroom can hear it, and any recommendation I agree with, that's made in public so everyone can hear it. So I bring to you managerial experience, having been a managerial attorney with legal services. I bring to you prosecution experience, and I bring with you final judicial experience. And I'm a candidate ready and willing to start and be available to work with all parties involved effective January 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Carnelia. And now we will ask Ray Garrett for his opening statement of 10 minutes. Ready, Amy? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Garrett.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you, because it's events like this that let our voters in Lafayette County make an informed decision. And quite frankly, whether you vote for me or one of the other 7 candidates, the most important thing is that the vote you cast be an informed vote. And this is an event that allows you to learn about the candidates. And I would ask you to research all of us, look into what county court is going to do, and make the vote, cast the vote that you believe is in the best interest of Lafayette County and your fellow Lafayette County citizens. I live at Lafayette Springs with my wife, Marcy, and our 2 children. I did not stray very far from home. I'm 1 mile from my parents' driveway, who still live in the same home that I grew up in. The reason that's important is because as a father, son, and husband that has lived here his entire life, I have the same interest in a fair and efficient court system and safe communities that the rest of you do. As most of you already know, this is a non-race, and so people are not running as Republicans or Democrats. But I've never ran for anything before, and so I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. I've been out knocking on people's doors, and a lot of people have asked me what I am. I give them all the same answer. I consider myself to be a Christian American citizen, no more, no less. I've had a few people that tell me that's not good enough, that's a lawyer answer, and they want a real answer. And so I've started trying to explain to people what I consider a Christian American citizen to be and why that's important as relates to county court. Well, first of all, it means that I understand that judges are supposed to apply the law as written in the Constitution and as written in the laws passed by the legislature. A judge is not supposed to put his or her ideas to what the law should be or what would be better in place of what the law actually is. I understand that that means you read the entire law that applies in a given case, and that's what you look at. For example, the First Amendment, everybody knows, guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and it also, however, allows you to peacefully assemble to petition government for the redress of grievances, in addition to protecting freedom of the press. It does all these things, and so you have to look at the entire thing if you're talking about the First Amendment. I also understand that no one should be deprived of their liberty or property without due process. Our Bill of Rights guarantees that. Again, for example, the Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures and provides you're not going to get a warrant without probable cause. Well, that's important because county court will be called on to decide whether or not a warrant should be issued. The Eighth Amendment provides that you cannot have unreasonable bails or bonds. That's important because we will share jurisdiction for initial appearances with justice court, but at the same time, your county court judge, whoever he or she may be, will be asked to decide what is a reasonable bond that ensures that this person will come back to court, but does not unfairly punish someone who has not been convicted of a crime. I understand that everyone is to be treated fairly and equally, and everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And if I'm elected, that will be the standard. Everyone will be treated the same, and everyone will be not only presumed innocent in words, but treated as if they are innocent until they are proven otherwise. At the same time, I understand that law enforcement is not the source of every problem in our society, and that those men and women get up every day and put on a bulletproof vest and a badge so the rest of us don't have to, and that should be respected, and they should be recipients of our gratitude for that. I do promise that I will be fair and impartial. I was asked a few days ago why a person who said he was a Christian American citizen would run for judge, because a judge is not supposed, a Christian is not supposed to judge. I said, that's the example of what I'm trying to make to a point to you. You have to apply the entire thing. And if you read the actual passage, it is not that Christians shouldn't judge. It's that Christians should judge fairly, because you will be judged by the same standard you apply. That's very important to me, because I believe any judge, and also our county court judge, should not hold anyone to a different standard than he or she holds everyone else who comes before them. And no one should be held to a standard that that judge is not willing to hold himself to or his family to. Now, what's county court going to do? Well, we're going to do a lot of things, because we have 50,000 people and we get a county court now. The first thing that people are aware of generally is that there is a backlog in circuit court. As of the October docket, there were 309 felony cases awaiting trial in Lafayette County. We have three very good circuit court judges, but they are here a total of 14 weeks in term each year. They simply cannot get to everything. County court will be here year round. And if we elect somebody who says, I'll show up when the courthouse door is open at 8 o'clock and I'll be available every day, all day, we can get things done. Most of the cases that could be transferred from circuit court, obviously any non-capital felonies and civil cases under 200,000 are going to take 2 days, 3 at the most. A lot of them will be one-day cases. We can set those on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to have any trials we need to have. Then we can say, this is a full-time youth court. Right now, our youth court meets, in terms of holding trials, 1 day a month. We can change that to 1 day a week without interfering with anything else, and give children who are neglected or children who are in need of supervision an opportunity to be in a system where they get help. And what I mean by that is, you don't have to be trying cases every day. You can have children brought back or parents brought back, depending on what type of case it is, for a review. You can put a child on probation if he is a youthful offender, but instead of saying you're on probation for 90 days, we can do something like say, no, you're on probation for 6 months, but at 90 days, we're going to have a review. And if you haven't gotten in trouble, if the school truancy officer hasn't been reporting you of not coming to school, if you've been going to any behavioral classes through community care that we've asked you to utilize and provided for you, we'll let you off probation early because you're deserving of that. If there's problems with you getting to do the things you need to do, then we've got time to address that before we just say, okay, we're done with you.
Garrett, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now have 5 minutes to ask questions of the candidates, and my colleague Don Mason will also have 5 minutes. Ms. Fondren, the question I have for you is concerning eminent domain. Is economic development an appropriate reason for eminent domain? In other words, to tear down a house for a shopping mall as opposed to, for example, tearing down a house for a public park or a hospital?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
One of the things that I've learned from having, I've mentioned this at some of the forums that I have worked with individuals who lost their homes out on 7 South when we expanded the highway. You're talking about as far as the issue with factories versus a park. Well, I guess I would have to go, I would be looking at, will this bring economic development for people who are in need of jobs? Because a lot of times there is a need for jobs in the county, and that's got to be balanced against the folks who are losing their lands and how the county can place them in an alternative situation. So as far as a park or whatever, I agree that that's something that would be worthy, but I cannot say that I would totally disagree that sometimes economics would be beneficial to not only just the company that's bringing it here, but also some citizens who may need some higher paying jobs. A lot of times those of us who have maybe been blessed with more higher paying jobs don't see the need for it. But that is one of the things I would balance, the economics of bringing that factory here versus how many jobs it could bring and how many people would be in need of those jobs and how it would raise the income of low income citizens in the county. So I would balance all of those things.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett, the question for you is, does a Christian American judge, what is that person's stance toward atheists and non-Christians?
Well, the Constitution of the United States says that we cannot establish a religion. And so we cannot and we should not. Everyone should be free to worship the God of their choice as he or she pleases, or to not worship. That is what the Constitution says, and that would be my view on it. When I say a Christian American citizen, I'm talking about, in my view, a judge should apply the golden rule, which is treat everyone as you would like to be treated if you were in that position. Second, it is to be impartial and judge everyone fairly. The reason that that's important to me is my firm was asked to collect unpaid fines from people who had been sentenced by the courts several years ago. We started finding out that a large number of these people did not even realize they had been fined because they didn't have a court system that conveyed that to them. And so we now take special public defender appointments where there are conflicts. We take in circuit court, we take those appointments in youth court because it's important to me that everyone be treated fairly regardless of who or she is.
Thank you. Don, I'll hand it over to you. And then if there's a minute or two, I have another question.
You still have plenty of time, Joanne.
Okay.
If you want.
Then I have
You
another
have 10
question.
minutes. Okay.
I have another question for Mr. Garrett. What are the appropriate monitoring mechanisms to be used for probationers? What kinds of things, especially technologies, can be used in an appropriate manner to keep track of probation? You're on mute, Ray.
Excuse me, I hit the button incorrectly. Number one, I've had several clients that I have gotten out on bond under conditions they wear an ankle bracelet. I've done that both in youth court and in circuit court so that you can tell where they are at. I've also had people who were placed on probation with curfews. That's usually a youth court matter. I've also had people who, after they were sentenced, were put on house arrest, but were given leeway to go to work, given leeway to go grocery shopping, but they had to be home. You know, your job, you get off work at 4 o'clock, you have to be home at 4:30. You have to be at work at 7. You can leave work at 6, leave home at 6:30. You can do all those things. You can also place them in programs through Communicare and other agencies where they are reporting in that, hey, I went to this class, I did what I'm supposed to do. And so we know whether or not they are doing that. Also, as I mentioned earlier with youth court, some things are as simple as checking with the truancy officer has this child been in school or in the last 30 days since we put them on probation? Have they had 5 unexcused absences? If they have, then we need to take a different approach to get their attention. If they're doing what we want them to do, the goal is rehabilitation and make them ready to be productive citizens again, not just to punish them.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Fondren, can you give me an example of a case that you may have had before you that involved domestic violence, specifically a battered wife, and what your issue that you faced was and how you handled it?
Okay, are we talking civil, or I guess I'm as chancery or circuit battered wife situation?
However,
Either way.
however you want to define that. I'm just looking for an example of how you handled it.
Okay, so many times in chancery in particular, in battered wives situation, it is very difficult. The law is a little bit better now, because when I initially was practicing law, you had to, did I cut myself off?
No, you're fine.
Okay, when I was initially practicing law, you had to have someone to witness the abuse. Now the legislature has come forward with us and realized that that's the product of abuse is always in a hidden situation. It's normally between the spouse or between the spouses. So that's happened a lot of times. And what's really that has been hardening to me in criminal cases that I have prosecuted is that many times you may have a lady who's being abused, and also there's sexual abuse in the home going on. Also, if there's a child there that's not the father's child, and because of her income, she's trapped in that situation. Many of us know situations where we hear of a domestic violence person going back because they can't afford to get out. And that's the same situation. You have domestic violence victims who are trapped in a home for sexual assault reason or domestic violence reason, but income will not allow them to leave. North Mississippi Rural Legal Services now has a domestic violence project which specifically is dedicated to domestic violence cases, which is good. And they're there, and many times they're there to represent the victims when there's domestic violence involved. And I think that's doing a lot of help, in particularly in all the counties around the northern area.
Our time is limited, so excuse me. What I'm asking is, and you may not be able to have this answer. You cite a case where you used either law or equity to reach that woman, and if so, what remedy were you able to apply?
Okay, are you asking as a judge?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking you were asking as an attorney. Well, yes, in domestic violence cases, that happen pretty often. We have repeated domestic abuse between citizens or husband and wife. And normally what I do in situation is that I will put them on a 6-month probation where a husband and wife say, of course, by the time they get to court, everything is fine. I don't want to press any charges, Judge. I don't even know why we're here. But that's my thing to them, and is that, listen, you're pulling resources off the street that may be needed somewhere else. So if you tell me you're being abused, I'm going to enforce it. So normally what we do is require them to go to domestic violence counseling and follow up for 6 months. So I have had several cases where I have not seen the victims back. I don't know whether it is because I threatened them or it's working, but that's normally how we handle that, particularly when the parties are married and not ready to go forward with a divorce.
Thank you, Ms. Fondren. I appreciate your answer. Your
Thank
turn, Don.
All right, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I want to take a quick moment out of my time to echo a note that was put into the chat box. I hope by this point you're all familiar enough with Zoom to know how to get to the chat. And I just want to stress you should feel absolutely free. In fact, I urge you to type into the chat, any questions you may have this evening. And we'll do our best to note those questions. I only see one in there so far, very similar to question that I would want to ask myself. So let me now ask, gosh, it's hard to know where to start, but Mr. Garrett, let me start with you. You were telling us about, it sounds like, you have a very, very high regard for first responders like the police and so forth that have, put their lives on the line and so forth. How would you make sure that you are, or would you regard their testimony with the same skepticism, if you will, or put their testimony to the same test as you would private citizens?
Obviously, everybody's testimony should be evaluated for its veracity and its truthfulness. And I have done criminal defense for 27 years, and I know exactly what you're talking about. There are a lot of judges that the officer is presumed to be telling the truth. Well, if you do what good defense attorneys do, you look at their reports and you see whether or not it lines up. And it's the prosecutor and defense attorneys, of course, are supposed to do that, but the judge can also ask questions in some instances. And if it is not clear, that should be explored. And to get to what you're saying, I had a case several years ago. The officer testified to ABC, and my client denied ABC, and we had a video. And the officer's final response was, well, my eyes can perceive things that a video camera can't record. Sometimes it's pretty obvious that they can't be believed. And so you have to treat everyone the same, and no one is presumed to be right just because who he or she is.
Okay, Ms. Fondren, let me ask you, we hear a lot these days calls for abolition of prisons, prison abolition. Do you believe there's still a place in our criminal justice system for prisons? And if so, what role should prisons play?
Mr. Mason, I just feel like the whole prison system may need to have an evaluation, because nobody in the system is happy about the system. Even the jail, they're complaining because they're over there in the jail too long. Even when the prosecution sends them to department, they'll turn them a 10-year sentence or become a 2-year sentence, and they're back on the street, and everybody's saying, what is he doing back on the street? So basically, and then the cost of incarceration is so high that nobody's happy with it. So I think there needs to be an evaluation of the whole system of, I was listening to something recently that said, of course, most of us know the United States incarcerates more folks than anybody else, and we're supposed to be the progressive country. So I just feel like the whole prison system could do with a work over, particularly on nonviolent crimes, and maybe how we start folks out in the system and make them into violent offenders that they may not would have been had they not been housed with some violent offenders. But yes, I believe there's still a need for that and total reevaluation of everything.
Okay. Mr. Garrett, would you like to quickly respond to that as well?
I believe that what you're supposed to do with the justice system is, first, you're looking at rehabilitation, and second, you're looking at deterrence. Unfortunately, deterrence is the easier of the two to do because you can lock them up and throw away the key. The way I believe the court should do it is you look at each individual and their circumstances surrounding the crime, and you try to use the resources in the system to rehabilitate. And if you have a low-level first offender, put an ankle bracelet on them and give them house arrest rather than putting them in parchment for 5 years. On the other hand, if you've got someone who was on house arrest and broke into a home, you have to do something different. If you have a person, as a gentleman that I represented in Lafayette County, I met him in LCDC for the first time, and he said, Mr. Garrett, you need to know, to start with, I have an extensive criminal history, and it was about 3 pages long. That person is different from someone who got caught burglarizing a car because he or she was drunk on Thursday night and didn't have anything better to do. You address them differently.
Okay, we're running, half of our time is gone. So let me now ask, we also hear a lot I mean, there's plenty of statistics out there about the high rates of minority incarceration. So that relates to the question that has been placed in the chat already. I don't think Don will mind if I step on his toes here, but do you believe, and I'd like you each to respond to this. So let's start with you, Mr. Garrett. Do you believe that there are problems in our system in terms of how it treats the poor or racial minorities? You know, and related to that, what do you believe accounts for the high rates of minority incarceration? And what could be done about that? What could you do about that as county court?
All right, as county court judge, it would be a long process, but you have to start somewhere. And yes, there are a disproportionate number of people who come from poor economic circumstances that wind up in the system. Part of that is in youth court. I'm over there every month. I take special appointments. The absence of the father or the absence of a parent, period. The first thing you do is you make the parents of these youthful offenders come to court so that you can make sure they are involved and compel them to be involved. Second, as you move on and people get older, you tie probation or early release to the extent that the court can, and it's not up to LCDC, to doing things that improve their ability to make a living outside of prison. And what I mean by that, you tie probation to GED, you tie probation to going to community care to address your substance abuse problem. And you provide those resources that are there, but in large part are underutilized. And then to the extent that a judge can, you try to get them funded better.
Okay, Ms. Fondren?
I just think one of the ways that we need to start is having more African-American and more minority officers, because when you're on the street patrolling and you stop your neighbor's kid, your attitude is going to be completely different. Not that you're going to let him go if he or she has done anything criminal, but I think that that's where it starts. And when we get into court and decisions are made and law enforcement recommendation are highly included in there, if we don't have any minority parents or people, stakeholders in there making recommendation about what to do with this minority child, then the only somebody who's going to be making a recommendation is going to be that officer. So majority of the time is not going to be of the African-American or whatever race, minority race. So we need more law enforcement that look like the people that are incarcerated. So they'll feel comfortable in making, when they stop them on the street and they just have a beer in the car, they'll be able to talk to them and relate more to them. And so I think that a lot of that is that we need more people in the system who are actually representing the minority race. We have a district attorney office. There's one minority prosecutor in there, but other than that, I just think that leads to folks being incarcerated and looked at maybe a little bit different. It's not necessarily a prejudice. It's just that you know your neighbor and you're gonna think differently of your neighbor's kid than you would a kid you don't know.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how much time we have. Yeah, okay, right on the dot. All right, I think, Joanne, we're ready now for questions from the audience. Is that correct?
Yes, we are, and we don't have any at the moment. So I will take moderator's prerogative to ask a few questions, and Don, jump in whenever.
Okay.
This is for both of you, whoever wants to answer first. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, in his dicta, Justice Clarence Thomas said that they should next take marital equality as an issue, and to undo that and overturn that the way Roe v. Wade was overturned. Could you make a comment on your view of whether marriage equality should be overturned the way Roe v. Wade was?
Well, I would say this as Mr. Garrett has said earlier, we're committed to to the law and we have to follow the law. We have personal opinion that I think we will bring to the bench. And I think once the Supreme Court hands something down, if it says that marriage equality as we know it is no longer law, then we're going to be stuck with that. And that's why it's so important that people who care about these issues get out and voice these issues and stop them before they get to the judges, because our jobs as a judge is to interpret the law. And I don't want to go on to the bench making a determination. I don't think anything like that will ever get to county court, who knows, but I wouldn't want to go on to the bench saying, this is my position on abortion, this is my position on marriage equality or anything. I have my personal position, but that would not influence how I would rule as a judge. I will be committed. I've made some unhappy choices about some of the rulings that I've made that I didn't necessarily agree with, but I will follow the law on it.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett.
Yes, ma'am. I would agree with Ms. Fondren that personal opinions of the judge are not what it's about. And so I am asking the people to give me the job, and by asking for that job, I'm committing to following the law, whatever the law may be. And so from that point of view, I would attempt to remove my personal views from any decision, regardless of the topic. However, having said that, a lot of people overlook the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. And the 10th Amendment says that unless the Constitution specifically gives the power to the federal government or specifically denies it to the states, that those powers are reserved to the states and the people. Those type issues you're talking about, in my view, either get addressed one of two ways: on a state-by-state basis, where Mississippi and New York can do whatever those two states want to, or Congress has to step up to the plate and they pass a law that makes it a federal law. This is the way it is from coast to coast. But short of congressional action to take it to the step of making it a federal law or amending the Constitution, I think the 10th Amendment clearly says it's up to each individual state to make those decisions.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question. What do you think the public schools could do to assist the youth court's handling of youthful offenders? And whoever wants to take that first.
Well, as one of the first thing that I did as a candidate was went and sat down and had a conversation with the city superintendent. I haven't gotten the opportunity to speak with the county because it's so important, because in my opinion, they're the first people who see a youth going down the wrong path. And I assured him that I wanted him on my collaborative team, and I wanted the school system on out. They ought to be able to call the judge and say, Judge, we're seeing a problem here. The youth court need to get on this, get on that. So I think the school are instrumental in giving us the right direction. He said some things to me that as far as what was going on in the school system, seeing fights and things of that nature, that I didn't know. My kids have been out of school for some time now. I didn't know everybody was, folks were at school fighting. But I think community leaders and churches and all ought to be working together on this problem.
Mr. Garrett.
I would agree that it's a community-wide problem, not limited just to the school taking action. However, I go to youth court almost every month taking a case where there was a conflict in the public defender, or my partner goes as a special parent defender where children are neglected. First off is you address the truancy issue, that children have to be in school. If they're not there, they obviously can't learn. The second thing is I'm not for bringing every child that talks in class into youth court. However, if you've got children that are disrupting the school system to the point that they're taking away from the learning environment of other children, they need to be brought before someone who can get their attention and redirect them to, okay, maybe you need to be evaluated for attention deficit disorder. Maybe you need to go to a behavioral class sponsored by CommuniCare or through DHS, CPS, where we can help you to where you can learn to be a better student. But I think what you do is you have to have a discipline in the classroom so you have a learning environment. You have to have a safe school system, which youth court can certainly work with the schools to do both of that. And third, you have to ensure that the children are there, which is where the youth court aspect of county court comes into play. You bring the child and their parent in and you say, okay, this is a 7th grader. He hasn't been to school but 18 days out of the last 30. All of them were running unexcused. Let's do something.
Thank you. Let's ask each of you. It's the day after you've been elected to be the first judge of the court. What is your #1 priority? What's the very first thing that you are going to do or take on? We'll start with Carnelia Fondren.
As I said earlier, my #1, I said January 1, but actually after the runoff, if I'm fortunate enough, I'm going to be evaluating the youth court. I'm going to go to Judge Bell again, as I've tried to do in the past, to talk about it. I'm going to go to the CPS and talk with them. I'm going to get with law enforcement. I'm going to get with the superintendent. And when I go in on January 1, I'm going to actually have a plan. Now, what I would recommend, and the county has been real kind of tight-lipped about it, and of course, none of us want to ask any questions because we don't want to presume we're going to win. But I would think that there needs to be a transition period from Judge Bell to from the new court judge, because obviously we don't want to throw youth court into some drama that it doesn't necessarily need. So I'm going to do an evaluation of the entire system, include everybody that's in the system, talk with them, give me some good points on what's working, what's not working, develop a plan, try to lay out, that's just youth court, try to lay out, maybe I talked to some of the county courts about a jury day for civil trials, talk with the circuit judge about what are you going to give us from the circuit court, talk with Chancery Judge about, are you going to give us no fault? Are you going to give us a state? I'm going to talk with everybody. I guess I'll have me a little notebook, but I'm evaluating starting, if I can get up that next morning, the day after the election, trying to set up a plan. I don't want to just start January 1, not knowing what the plan is.
Thank you. Ray Garrett.
First of all, I would agree with her wholeheartedly that whatever is done, David Bell needs to be involved to the extent he wants to be involved, because I've been in front of him more often than not for the last 6 years in youth court, and he is an excellent judge and he does an excellent job with youth court. Now, as far as what I would do on day 1 after the election, if I'm fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to serve by the voters, is I would go sit down with the senior circuit judge and say, okay, Your Honor, what are you going to transfer to county court? And once I knew what was coming, I would then go sit down with the county prosecutor and say, okay, the person whose schedule is going to be most impacted by this is yours, because you now have to be in 3 places every week. You got to be in municipal court, you got to be in justice court, and you got to be in county court. I want to set out times, preferably first thing in the morning, say 8:30 to 9:30, where this court is always available for youth court detention hearings, shelter hearings, and initial appearances. I want to have 1 day a week that works with everybody else's schedule that we can have reserved for youth court matters. I want to have 3 days a week that we say these are the days we're going to deal with the cases transferred from circuit court. And I believe the easiest way to do that is circuit is in term here 14 weeks out of the year, and then you've got about 6 grand jury weeks. We take half of those weeks or half of the year, and we say those are reserved Monday through Wednesday for civil trials under $200,000. The other half, when circuit court is not here and the DA's office is not going to be tied up, or when we're going to try criminal cases, and we're going to implement scheduling orders to where you know when your plea day is, you know when your court day is, your trial date, we make those decisions. And then you could still have presumably Friday, but 1 day a week where you hear appeals from justice court and municipal court, preliminary hearings, and a motion day. And so I would try to organize it. The other thing I would do, there are various judges I've been practicing in front of for over 2 decades. I would take that month between the runoff, if I was lucky enough to win, and New Year's, and I would try to go sit down with as many of them as possible and say, okay, please give me the advice of how I can do this better and what I need to make sure I do.
Okay, I'm going to take this last question in the chat and then turn it over to Don. What kind of staff do you think you will need?
Well,
Start with Carnelia.
what the staff we would need and the staff we get may be a little bit different. I understand they've already hired a clerk over at Circuit to handle county court. We may not have mentioned tonight, but county court will be in the Circuit Court building. So, and then I'm assuming that we will get well, it's a court of record, so we'll get a court reporter, and I'm assuming an administrator. But I mean, that is something that's we're going to be restricted by what the board will give us on resources. But when I was visiting up at DeSoto County, half of their circuit court was committed to county court. Like if they had 8 clerks, 4 of them were county court clerk and 4 of them were circuit. Now, I don't have any dream that we will get that here, but I certainly would think that it would be great if we could get, if we're going to get the court reporter, we know maybe a court administrator, and a dream would be a staff attorney and maybe one other clerk, but you know, that's just a dream of mine.
Ray Garrett?
Well, I mean, obviously you got to have a court clerk in the circuit clerk's office to handle the cases that get transferred to county court, because those things they're going to be new cases filed all the time, and there's going to be presumably dozens transferred in short order. So you've got to have that clerk. Right now, you have a youth court coordinator that works with youth court. I would hope that we get to keep a youth court coordinator, because while we certainly don't need a full-time judge that does nothing but youth court, there is a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed in youth court. So I think you keep that position and just take it from Chancery and move it to county court so you don't have another employee. As Ms. Fondren said, you've got to have a court administrator to handle the scheduling, because if the judge is on the bench, he or she cannot talk to attorneys about when they can appear. And then obviously, court reporter is a given. And as she said, the dream would be you get a staff attorney just like you have in Chancery and Circuit, because if you're on the bench as much as I think we will need to be, there's going to need somebody that can look at what is being filed and lay it out before you get there in the morning, saying, okay, this is the high points.
Okay. Don, you want to?
Yes. Yes, let's start, and this is for both of you, but Mr. Garrett, let me start with you. And it's kind of a macro, high level kind of question, but what does the phrase, the rule of law, what does that mean to you? How would you define the rule of law?
Okay, it's been a long time since I was in law school, but I would define it as you have to have an ordered society. You have to have a mechanism for making sure that everyone is treated fairly and equally. And it doesn't mean that the strongest can overpower the weakest. It doesn't mean that the wealthy can dominate those less fortunate. And so the rule of law is everyone is subject to the same set of rules. Everyone has a level playing field. Everyone has the same presumptions of innocence as everyone else, but law maintains order in society at all levels.
Ms. Fondren?
I pretty much want to ditto everything Mr. Garrett said. In my opinion, the rule of law is what keeps society glued together. And as long as everyone is operating, believed to be operating under the principle that we will be treated for, everyone will be treated fairly. If you commit a crime, that there's punishment or there's some kind of a rehabilitation aspect of it. But I think the United States is built on that, whether it meets that goal or not. It's built on the premises that all of us are entitled to a fair treatment and that the law applies to us equally, no matter no matter from the president of the United States down to the folks here in Oxford, Mississippi. That's what the rule of law is premised on. Sometimes it falls short, but it's not. It's the individuals who are falling short, in my opinion. That's my goal or glory about it. It doesn't always meet that.
Yeah, well, speaking of, stop as in, are we out of the 25 minutes? Amy? Okay.
Okay, so that brings us to part of the program where we get closing statements. And again, keeping our alphabetical order by last name. We will go with Carnelia Fondren. You will have 5 minutes for a closing statement.
I'd like to thank the moderator and the league for allowing us to be here this evening. And again, it has been a pleasure. This journey in going over the months and getting ready for this position has been a eye-opening experience. Got a chance to meet quite a few citizens. I now understand, having campaigned, why there are over 50,000 folks in this county. But it's good for us to have this position. I think it's going to be good for everybody who's involved. It's going to be good for the youth of this county. It will be good for the sheriff department. Folks won't be in jail so long. It'll be good for, as Mr. Garrett said, circuit court, who has that extensive docket of over 300. And it's just going to be good for everybody. And hopefully those of us who work in Chancery know that if you call over there at any time and say, can I get on the judge's docket, they're probably going to be saying, well, the year's about gone now. So it will help everybody involved. And I think with my judicial experience that I bring to this and my vision for this court, that I, again, as I've told you during our discussion, I'm ready and prepared, and I will continually work with and for you. And I will always be accessible with all the parties involved, and I will be an open arbitrator on this journey. Thank you.
Ray Garrett, you have 5 minutes for a closing statement as well.
I would also like to thank people that put this on tonight, the League of Women Voters, for doing this, because this is an important election. And as is the case with all elections, the most important thing is that the voters cast informed votes and not just vote for whoever's name they happen to like or whatever. I am familiar with all 7 of my opponents in this race, and I have a high level of respect for each of them. We've all dealt with each other over the years in court. I would ask the voters to check each of us out, make your own evaluation as to who you believe would do the best job for the people of Lafayette County in this position, and what person will bring to the table the things that you want to see done as a county citizen. You can find all of my information on my Facebook page, my website, and my phone number is even listed. And I tell all my clients, if I cared for you calling me, I wouldn't give you the number. I tell everybody that's watching this the same thing. If you've got questions that you think of at midnight tonight or tomorrow that you didn't ask, do you want to ask me? If you'll text me or call me or email me, I'll do my best to answer your question. I haven't made but 2 promises to the people that I have knocked on their doors. And the first one is, if you elect me, I will show up to work every day at 8 o'clock when they open the door, and I'll be available all day. The second is, I'll do the best I can for you. That's all I can promise you. I say I'll be available every day. CPS doesn't go into homes where a child is neglected or abused between 8 and 5 usually. But if I have told my clients for the last 20-something years, I'm available 24/7 and have taken those calls, I will certainly take a call from CPS that needs an emergency hearing. I will certainly take a call from an officer that needs a warrant. I'm asking you to give me the opportunity to do this job to the best of my ability. And it is important that we select someone who will apply himself or herself to it for the benefit of Lafayette County, because regardless of anything else, our county court is going to largely be a reflection of what our first county court judge, whoever that may be, makes it. I do appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone's consideration. Thank you.
Well, thank you to our candidates tonight. And Don, do you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
No, just what you were saying. I thank the candidates, and I especially appreciate that folks came out tonight or came to Zoom. It's a handy tool to have. So thank you all very much.
Yes, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and a reminder that tomorrow night we have the second in our series, and the two candidates who will be speaking to us tomorrow night are Mr. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Mr. Jubera and Mr. Justice. So for those of you who want to continue learning more about our candidates, we have tomorrow evening, and then next week we have two more sessions on the 18th and the 20th of October. And by the time the series is over, we will have had the opportunity to hear from all 8 candidates for the court. So thank you very much. I hope we see you again tomorrow. And I'd like to thank the candidates for spending time with us.
So Ruth, I guess it's back to you.
Ruth, it's back to you.
Ruth? Okay, there's Ruth.
In a minute.
Okay.
Okay, guys, I thought you guys were going to send us off. So I was kind
Oh,
of
okay.
just kind of watching
I
everything
didn't have that
here.
clear. Okay.
That's okay. But thank you all again from behalf of the League of Women Voters for being here. You can look at the links that I posted earlier to find out about these two candidates, and also go to our website and you can click on Vote 411 and get information on all the other candidates. So far, we only had one candidate who has not completed the questionnaires, and I hope that that person will catch up by the time we get to hear them. But both of these candidates filled it all out, and there's questions you might be interested in hearing what they have to say about. If you need any help with that, just contact a League of Women Voters member and they'll get you some help. All right, so good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right,
Good
thank
night.
you all.
Night.
Good night.
Appreciate it.